We're talking about the American Revolution. In the beginning, prior to the actual warfare, there were taxes, and as most Americans are taught, the people didn't like taxation without representation. These taxes were repealed, and the people basically refused um, to acknowledge them. And the king made a fateful decision. King George made a fateful decision to actually remove some of the taxes that he had imposed. This basically sent a message to the colonists, meaning when you basically when you give in to somebody else, you basically tell them that if it happens again and they basically protest it, then you'll obviously take it away again. And it was actually quite a fight back and forth. The king kept putting taxes up on different things, and the people kept protesting them, and he kept taking them back, and that basically escalated everything. The Boston Tea Party, well, wasn't exactly a tea party. It basically there was an excessive tax upon tea on the colonists, and they went aboard a ship in Boston Harbor and threw a bunch of tea overboard, basically telling the king and Great Britain altogether that they weren't going to accept any taxes at all, even just 1 cent more than they should be paying for things. And then there's the Boston Massacre, which really escalated everything. It was 1775, the earlier months of 1775, and basically there were some British soldiers on the streets of Boston. They were guarding a building, and the colonists decided to throw snowballs and shout insults at the soldiers. One of the soldiers, no one knows exactly who it was, the name of the soldier who actually did it, but one of the soldiers panicked and shot into the crowd of protesters, which sent a chain reaction. Other soldiers came to his aid, and before you knew it, they were firing into the people, who eventually did disperse, and a few people, one person, the first person to die was he was actually an African American, a free African American. Alright, so now, moving on to the first battle of the American Revolution, Lexington and Concord. In April of 1775, General Thomas Gage, sent 700 men to seize ammunition that was stored by the rebels, or the Minutemen, militia, whatever you want to call them, in Lexington, right here, just outside of Boston. British soldiers met with rebels. There are 700 men, 700 British soldiers who were the highest, best trained soldiers in the world at the time, faced off against 77 basically armed citizens, who did have, some of them did have a little military experience from the French and Indian War. And they met on the green in Lexington, and they basically just stared at each other for a long time, and then there comes the shot that was heard around the world. No one knows who fired the first shot. No one knows even what side he was on. No one knows if he was British or if he was an American colonist. But somebody fired a shot at the other, which obviously started a chain reaction. It's often referred to as a shot that was heard around the world because it basically started the revolution. It's the entirety of the revolution because of that one shot. No one knows if it was a British soldier or if it was a colonist who actually fired that shot. But basically, the colonists were pretty much beaten. Obviously, 700 versus 77. Who do you think's going to win? But then the British went to Concord to grab the ammunition that was stored there. But on their way back to Boston, more Minutemen from the surrounding areas, such as Springfield, Providence, Newport, they were all coming back, in Manchester. They were all coming down here. They were all received the call from Paul Revere and other Night Riders that the British were in Lexington, they were in Concord, and they were already on their way down here to Lexington and Concord, and basically they meet up and basically harass the British on their way back to Boston, shooting basically guerrilla warfare. They'd hide on the side of the road in trees and then just come out and take some shots at the British. Moving on, the American colonists actually received great losses. Well, not really that great. They in the earlier stages of the war, they were having a really hard time actually winning their battles. They were actually losing just about every battle they had. They do not win a major battle for some time, and it looks exactly like it should have, the most powerful country in the world against rebels, and really the British should have crushed the rebels, and they were in the earlier stages. Which brings us to Ticonderoga. Ticonderoga, as many people learn, Ticonderoga is a fort in northern New York, and Ethan Allen, who commanded the Green Mountain Boys, which was a militia force in neighboring Vermont, met up with Benedict Arnold, who was leading his own force of militia to take Fort Ticonderoga, and they both basically just randomly met up with each other, and they decide to unite forces and basically take Ticonderoga. Ethan Allen demanded that he take command of the entire force, even Benedict Arnold's, and Benedict Arnold was definitely very reluctant, but ultimately he did give in. And actually, what made Ticonderoga possible, they actually moved at nighttime. It was very, very foggy and damp, and the sentry actually back then they used muskets, and you actually had to put gunpowder from a cartridge into the musket. If it gets wet, then it's virtually useless, and it was very damp. His gun wouldn't fire. So therefore, he saw them coming. He couldn't fire a shot. So if he was able to fire a shot, then it would have alerted everybody inside the fort, which it was at nighttime. Everybody was sleeping except the sentry, and he wasn't able to get that shot off because of his gun was damp. His gunpowder was damp. And so the Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold and their force actually went into Ticonderoga without even a shot being fired, and took it without a shot actually being fired. And that is all the time we have for part 1. See you in part 2.